Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second session today of our Fix Out Star Party. We're going to do an astrophotography session today with Andy Campbell from the ASV, and he's going to run through how to create dynamic images. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat section, and I'll put them up and read them out for Andy to answer. Also, again, don't forget to grab your tickets to the Skywatch Star Adventurer and the Ioptron Cube Pro. Still tickets available. Going to be drawn this evening at around about 8:30ish, 9 o'clock, somewhere in that region. But for now, let's welcome Andy into the room and get his presentation going. Good afternoon,
Hey, thanks,
Andy.
Mark. How are you guys? Thanks very much for inviting us along this afternoon, and it's a pleasure to talk to my colleagues here at the Astronomical Society of Victoria, but also to speak to all the lovely people from the Astronomical Society of South Australia, who I would love to be seeing live and having a chat with you, and maybe drinking an ale or two at Nil.
Next year.
We go there every year, and it's a fantastic event. I love going to that show, but sadly, COVID's kept us away from all of that.
It has.
The good news is that whilst I was invited to go and do a couple of presentations in New York this year in March, unfortunately, COVID put an end to that as well. So I get to present these virtually to you lovely people today. So thank you for that, chats. And hopefully we can stimulate and inspire you with one or two thoughts on creating dynamic images today.
Wonderful. So when you're ready, if you'd like to share your screen, and we can get stuck into it.
Excellent. Alrighty. So let's do that. And crack on.
I like that one, crack on. What we've got to do these days. We cracked on last session. We had some technical issues, and we cracked on. We had some great support coming through from the viewers offering suggestions. Oh, look, there you go. We got our first one. Lee says that your shirt's looking very Karl Kruszelnicki.
I've met Dr. Karl a couple of times now. He's a lovely guy. We have, in fact, shirted together once or twice.
I love it.
But he's, the thing about Dr. Karl is that what you see is what you get, and it doesn't stop. Even when, after a couple of presentations that he and I both did for the World Science Festival in Queensland, I met him at the bar afterwards, and honestly, it was just like he kept going with the presentation. Dr. Karl is this amazing individual who, it just doesn't turn off, and he's an extraordinary man. So that's cool. Glad you like the shirt, guys.
All right. So
alrighty. So
now to get stuck into it.
Let's rock on, guys. Have you got my screen up there now?
I do. Yes, full screen. He's ready to rock and rolling. Everyone can see it.
So, guys, what I want to talk about is creating dynamic images today, and obviously with a focus on astro. And just a little bit of background information on me, so you know who this guy is who's talking to you in a loud shirt. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. I have a family with a beautiful wife and 3 boys, who the youngest one's turned 12 today. He's glad to be back at school and out of lockdown, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it would be. Happy birthday to him as well.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving your time on his birthday.
We're heading off to the park after this, so it'll all be good.
Enjoy.
I'm a judge of the Australian Professional Photography of the Year Awards. I've done that for 25 years straight. That's me with my colleagues up there doing that. Previously, I'm a professional photographer, have been for 35 years. I shoot nowadays headshots for CEOs, execs, politicians, and lawyers. Had the Leader of the Opposition in yesterday. That was fun. And by night, I guess if I shoot stars by day, I shoot stars by night with this big Takahashi thing that you can see there set up in the backyard.
It's a nice beast, that one.
Yeah. I'm operating out of Melbourne, Australia, as you know. Beautiful city of 5 million people, just coming out of lockdown at last. The world's longest lockdown, I think, but the results have been spectacular. Particularly when you compare
again today, 8 days in a row with no cases.
Yeah, how about that? And of course, if you're watching overseas online, Melbourne's well known for food, sport, and food and sport.
I
Not
just
much
say
more
that
really, but it's
Can I just
the
say
capital of Australia for sports.
you've picked the best photo for the footy.
Tiger supporter, I'm guessing.
No, Magpie supporter. I always like seeing a pie take a mark.
Oh, there you go, you see. I also do a bit of mentoring with the whole Astro thing. So you can find me through my website, through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Currently mentoring people in the USA, Canada, Brazil, Oman, United Arab Emirates, and of course here in Australia. And we do those via Zoom, and they're very useful. We've had one chap recently who bought a telescope, didn't know anything about how to use it, what to do with it. We've had 8 sessions together, and now he's independently plate solving, autofocusing, guiding, and imaging beautiful, sharp images all by himself. So that's pretty cool and exciting that we can help there. But today, we are going to talk about something called the dynamic image recipe. Now, what the heck is that?
I was just going to say, what is a dynamic image?
Well, we all know about the technical stuff that we have to do to make astro pictures. We know we have to guide right. We have to get plate solving correct. We know we have to get flat and sharp, flat fields so we get sharp stars in all the corners, all that stuff. We're going to take that as a given. We're going to just assume that you've got all that right. And of course, with your processing, once again, there's craftsmanship and technique coming to the fore there. Probably takes just as much time and effort to process an image as it does to capture it in the first place. But what about this other thing, this unknown thing that maybe doesn't get as much attention? And that's the whole creative and subjective side of this, to make timeless, impactful images. And that's what I want to hit you with today, if that's okay. So sit back, buckle up, and here we go. Let's talk about creativity. So what is creativity? Well, we can break it down a little bit. There's a whole little stream of, I guess, subsections that we might just touch on, and we're going to illustrate all of these over the next hour and give you a little bit of thought so that when we go to take our next astro image, we might just consider exactly how we're going to place that subject, how we're going to shoot it, what we're going to do with it. Maybe we're not just going to automatically, place that subject right in the middle of the frame. So here we go. Let's talk about impact. So obviously, there's a definition of impact, and here's an impactful picture for you. One of the most powerful pictures in the world taken in the last decade. Last 2 decades. Tiananmen Square. Who would have thought that one gentleman could stop a whole bunch of tanks in their tracks? Who would have thought during the 1968 Mexico Olympics that, political motivated athletes would create something lasting to this day? And indeed, could you imagine being there when the Hindenburg exploded? Now, obviously, there's a certain amount of being there at the right place at the right time to create dynamic images such as these. But what happens with astro? How can we create dynamic, powerful images ourselves? Well, we could do something like this. That'll get your attention. Or we could be there at exactly the right place and exactly the right time with a lot of planning to come up with an eclipse image. I think it was Phil Hart, who's a well-known astrophotographer from Victoria, from the ASV, who took no less than 13 cameras to photograph the Great American Eclipse, and some stunning images with lots of planning.
And one fell over, I remember.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories out of that trip. Or indeed, getting exactly the right image of a comet. These are impactful images. So how about emotion? Emotion is what drives us all as human beings. It's the kind of thing that, makes you feel something. This image makes you feel something. It's horrific. It's a good picture. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a happy picture to make you feel something. Here, Einstein, greatest mind, perhaps, of the last couple of centuries. Who would have thought that someone would capture him with his tongue out? Or indeed, how about this amazing image from Michael Collins of Aldrin and Armstrong and the LEM with the entire population of humanity in the background? It's kind of the ultimate not selfie because he's the only one not in the picture. So again, how do we translate this into maybe an astro image? Well, Mark G's done a great job here. Mark G is a well-renowned astrophotographer based in New Zealand now. And you look at this image and it's timeless. It's fantastic. It could be father and son. It could be any kind of interpersonal relationship between these two people just enjoying space. And isn't that the thing that happens no matter where you are in the world? You go out at night, step back from the campfire and look up. You're going to ask yourself those big questions. You're going to go, wow. And we as astrophotographers, of course, get a chance to capture some of that and bring it a little closer to share it with our friends, family, and relatives. And indeed, this picture, Mark, won the Insight International Astronomy Photography of the Year, I think about 6 or 7 years ago with this one. And a lot of planning and research went into this. I think he shot it with a 600mm lens from about 3 miles away from this viewpoint. But it's an amazing image, and it certainly sort of puts you in context a little bit with, you know, who we are on the Earth and what's around us in the solar system.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, he does a great job. So what about a story? I mean, stories are what people are all about. You know, we sit around that campfire, we tell stories. Well, our images tell stories. And if we do them well, the story that should be there should be told. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, they say. Well, here's a picture that needs no words. It's gripping. Or one a little more local. Again, these are pictures with strong and profound stories. I'll leave you to interpret that one yourself. Well, how about this in an astro world? So here's an image of mine, and this one did quite well, got an APOD and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, yes, there's a technical story to it. You know, you can read that for yourself there. But the story behind the picture was that it reminded me of this painting by Van Gogh, the famous Sunflowers. And when I was arranging this, framing it on the back of my camera, I thought, you know, something just triggered in the back of my mind that, oh my gosh, this really reminds me of a bunch of sunflowers from this painting. That I had a really good art teacher at school, so I guess that helped. And indeed, you know, the story that it told was enough to perhaps get it recognized by the APOD guys and get whatever it is, 3 million hits on their website that day, and, you know, 2,500 shares on Facebook and all that kind of thing. So if you have a good story, then your picture will probably get good recognition. There's a very well-known international astrophotographer from Finland called JP Metsävainio. And JP's had an exhibition recently of his work, and he's produced a book with, of all people, Brian May from Queen. But he's kind of gone down a similar path here with this homage to the birth of Venus. This is Botticelli's very famous painting that you'd all be familiar with, or perhaps seen it in a book or even in an art gallery. But his version of IC 405 and 410 is not dissimilar. It's somewhat reminiscent of the composition of the painting. So it's pretty cool to be able to see this sort of thing and hit these emotional triggers that we all carry. And indeed, the ultimate would be something called Pareidolia. Now, in case you're not familiar with this term, this is what it's all about. This is seeing what isn't there. This is your mind trying to understand or make sense out of something that really doesn't make sense at all. Here's an example. You may have seen this one. This is a very famous picture taken by a Viking orbiter around Mars, 1976, I think it was, pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, and the whole world suddenly saying, there's life on Mars.
There's a giant man on Mars.
You know, my eldest son is absolutely fascinated by Martian rovers. He can tell you every single one of them, where they are, how far into their journey they are or where they've gone. But I can assure you that even with Martian rovers and orbiters and every other technology that's available to us today, there ain't no life currently that we know of on Mars. Or how about Sauron looking at you, the evil eye? Is he peering at you from Mordor, or is it just that the Helix Nebula does resemble a human eye in some cases? And, is the universe giving us the finger?
I do like that one.
Again, that's a Hubble image, and it does exist. It's what appears to us to be a fairly small little thing in the Carina Nebula, but it's real. So how can we use pareidolia in our images? Well, here's an image that I shot in the Large Magellanic Cloud of N44. Now, this particular nebula is massive. It's over 1,000 light years across. That more, if you like, in the center is in itself 200 light years across. So we're talking about a huge thing in space. But it's this wacky looking, bizarre shaped object that you think, wow. Now, a colleague of mine, a gentleman named Mike Sidonio, aka Strongman Mike, you might know him from Ice and Space or Flickr. Now, Mike shot this as well. And with his permission, he's actually gone and annotated the images. So you can actually see all the different things that he found in N44. Everything from Admiral Akbar to gremlins, downhill skiers, frogmouth monsters. It's all there. And that's just our mind trying to interpret and find sense in shapes, if you like. And I think that's what drives us to create powerful and impactful images, so that when a judge goes up to see your picture, or you show it to your friend and it says, oh, that looks like a gremlin, that's their mind making sense out of it and finding something to, I guess, to talk about. Because otherwise, some of these nebulas could be a bit, if you'll pardon the pun, nebulous. So what about the way that we compose images? So composition is something that painters have been, using and since antiquity. And here's a little example about the way that, perhaps an image could be framed more dynamically, if you like, the one on the right. And we can easily translate that into the world of astro. So here's a very nice picture of M20, the Trifid. Looks great, sharp, clear, absolutely terrific. You'd be well pleased with that. Here's one that I shot some years back, but framed very differently. I framed this using something called the rule of thirds, so that we can feature M20 in its environment. You get a sense then, there's M21, I think the star cluster up to the top right near 3 o'clock there. And perhaps this tells us a little bit more about the environment in which that nebula resides. You don't have to just put your subject in the middle. Yes, there may be some arguments there that, your telescope is designed so that, the central point of it is, ultimately the sharpest and best optically perfect place to put your subject. But how about this one? This one's by Andrew Lead. Now, Andrew, I've been mentoring Andrew a little bit lately. I probably don't have to when you see the quality of the images he's putting out himself. This is like his third image, I think. And it's absolutely fabulous. Not only is it technically wonderful from the point of view of handling the dynamic range, he's got the core well sorted out there, and every star is pin sharp, but he's also included, I think it's M121 on the far left there at about 10 o'clock to give scale. Because there's that globular cluster there, now we can get a sense of the true majesty and scale of 47 Took. It's a really well-produced image, and hats off to him. And again, he hasn't just stuck it in the middle. So let's talk about another little thing that happens a lot. And that's the just because you can fit two objects in your picture doesn't mean you should. Sorry. All right, here's the example. So in this case, we've got a lovely silhouette. You've got the gentleman there. Obviously, you can see the picture. But your eye goes from the gentleman to the tree, to the gentleman, to the tree. And it doesn't have anywhere to comfortably rest. it rests in this void in the middle where there's nothing really going on in the picture. And indeed, here's a lovely picture by Christian Burge. And again, we see this often. We see two nebulas side by side, but your eye kind of goes from one to the other to one to the other, and it kind of disappears in this black hole in the middle. And it doesn't really kind of work in some ways. Here's another classic pairing by Jean-Francois, and I believe he actually won an award for this image, and good on him. But again, your eye darts from 82 to 83 and backwards and forwards, and it kind of resides with this hole in the middle. So maybe it's not the best use of the frame. So let's go back to that rule of thirds again. So here's your classic portrait using the rule of thirds. Essentially, you're balancing the image, giving it some negative space on the right-hand side here. Here's another example. So these are obviously terrestrial examples, classic landscapes, but when we're framing up our astro images, we can do exactly the same thing. So here's a couple of examples for you, and a little bit of trivia, just to, the rule of thirds is not something I've invented by any means. It's been around for, 200 or 300 years. So here's an astro image using the rule of thirds really well. Jim Metzger's framed NGC 2244 beautifully. Oh, and a bit of trivia, if you use your imagination at the top right quadrant there, that section, they call that the mermaid.
Well, it looks like a skull to me.
Yep, I think you've got to hold your mouth right and spin the code around at a different angle and so forth, but there it is. We've already talked about this one. Well, how about this fabulous image by James Garlick? Now, James is from Tasmania, and he picked up a Malin Award for this beautiful image of the Southern Aurora, perfectly framed using the rule of thirds. Or indeed, we can use our field of view to create dynamic images. So this is the Fighting Dragons of Ara, NGC 6188, an image I was lucky enough to win a David Malin Award, Deep Space category 2015. Here's the same subject, but now I've shot this with a different telescope, a much wider field of view. The one on the left was with a William Optics FLT 110, and the one on the right is using a Stellarvue SV70T with a field of view of 2 by 3 degrees. So suddenly we can see the context of these two fighting dragons, and we can really now see what's happening in space around those guys. We can almost see where those molecular clouds are formed or forming, and indeed we can get a sense of the power and the majesty that's going on there as these molecular clouds are twisted into sort of works of art, if you like. And there's this wacky bipolar nebula down the bottom left-hand side there, which I first thought when I was imaging that, I thought, oh damn, I've stuffed up here. There's something on the chip, but in actual fact, it's real. It's there. Space does throw up some wacky things.
It's photo bombing your shot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Looks good though. Beautiful image.
This image, I'm not sure what they were smoking the night they named this one at the Anglo-Australian Observatory, but this is called the Running Chicken Nebula. And I have no idea where you can see a running chicken there. To me, it looks more like Jar Jar Binks. But you can find your own interpretation of that. But again, using that same wide field telescope, I was able to include the entire nebula and the Pearl cluster to the far left. And it was a bit, a bit fortuitous that I literally picked up that telescope from the TNT depot on the way to a star party, took it out of the box literally for the first time, set it up, shot this image and got an APOD for it. So that was a little bit of a lucky story in some ways. But visiting the same target with a much longer focal length now. So here I've visited this using a Newtonian 1147 millimeter focal length telescope from Sidereal Trading. In fact, is a very, very nice telescope, hand-built by Diego himself. But in this case, we can now zero in on some of the details and structures within that nebula And down the bottom, you can see the coal miner stoking the fires. You can see the misty mountain just behind him, the misty mountain top there. And because this one I've rendered it starless, you can clearly see the Bok globules at around halfway through down the image, the star-forming regions themselves, the interstellar dust. So different perspectives using the same object. Now, obviously, we can't change our field of view, at least, not until Elon Musk gets us to Mars, but we can certainly change the way that we approach something by using a different instrument. Or indeed, we might think about color and color palettes. And so essentially, any kind of photography, we want to make sure we come up with something that looks really good. And there's a handy dandy gadget here called the color wheel. Now, this image on the left is using complementary colors, very strong and very bold. You can clearly see the purple and the green on opposite sides of the color wheel. It's a bold, powerful image. Here is one much more subtle. This is using colors essentially on the same side of the color wheel, almost monochromatic in its feel. So what happens if we take that into Astro? Well, this image on the left is by Neil Creek, who's a local photographer in Melbourne. And Neil won a Malin Award for this image. And it's a beautiful use of incorporating light pollution within an image in an artistic and beautiful way. So this is, I think, looking at Lake Epilogue from memory. Possibly that's Ballarat in the background. But again, you've got the warm into cold. You've got the warmth of the light glow of the light pollution contrasted against the deep dark blues of the Milky Way. And he's framed it beautifully, as you'd expect a professional photographer would. So a deserving image, and I think that was the cover of the Ice and Space calendar as well. On the opposite side of the color wheel, an image from the Insight Astronomy Photographer of the Year a couple of years ago. Again, strong use of color with contrasting colors. Hope you're getting something out of this. Give us a shout out if you're out there in StreamYard land or wherever you are today.
I think
if anyone's watching from somewhere outside of Australia, give us a hoy so we know you're there. Sorry, it's I think 3 o'clock in the morning in Great Britain, but in the States I think it's about 9 o'clock last night. So
we've got nothing else
say
to
hi.
do. We've got nothing else to do in Great Britain at the moment. So
I thought I'd show you a little bit of technique here. This is not a technique talk, but this is using the same subject but shooting it 4 different ways. So for many of us, we start out with a telescope and a DSLR camera, and we can create a beautiful image just like this one Benjamin Barre has of M42. And there's nothing wrong with it. It looks great. However, many of us on our journey, we advance up to a mono camera, or indeed we start introducing filters. In this case, we've introduced a hydrogen alpha filter, Erica Africa here. And hydrogen alpha at 656 point something or other nanometers is almost invisible to us. So we're talking a very red color of light. But if we have a camera that is sensitive enough and it doesn't have the IR cut filter that the DSLR does, which in fact removes hydrogen alpha, then suddenly we can let the HA show through and we can see more of the structure of the nebula coming through. Indeed, we can take that even further by then using an oxygen filter, ionized oxygen filter, as well as the hydrogen alpha, as Druidus and Goldman have here on the left. And now we can really see what's going on in M42. There's a lot happening up there. And I think you'd admit that we're taking our very nice original DSLR picture to a whole new level now, because we're starting to see the unseen. And indeed, we can take that all the way to a complete narrowband image of M42 here, using the ionized oxygen, ionized sulfur, and hydrogen alpha filters, and assigning them different colors. Many people would probably argue that M42 looks better in natural colors, and I think we had Paul Hasey on earlier who won a Malin Award, in fact the entire competition some years back, with a very beautiful image of M42, which was in sort of true natural colors, if you like. But I think it's just a little bit interesting to see it in narrowband as well. How about this. Now, I mentioned David Malan a few times, and I guess I'll mention him a lot throughout the talk because he's regarded as the godfather of astrophotography, and he ran the Anglo-Australian telescope for the best part of 30-odd years. This was, I guess, his image of the Trifid, and it was a kind of iconic standalone image. And I wanted to see, well, okay, I'm in Burwood in Melbourne. I'm not far from the ASV. I'm in light pollutionville. I'm under a Bortle 6 or 7 sky. What could I possibly do with my sidereal trading 10-inch Newtonian that might somehow emulate that image? And so working really, really hard with dealing with gradients from hell, I came up with this image. I had to come up with some new techniques, in fact, using blue just as illuminance to, in fact, try and get some of that reflected nebulosity to show through, because it's really quite hard from light pollution fill. And obviously you can see my star colors are suffering a bit from being in light pollution, but just the challenge was there. You know, sometimes they throw these things out at you and you think, well, let's see how close we can get. Let's see what we can do. Now, of course, we don't have to stop there. We can then think, all right, let's put a hydrogen alpha filter on and see what that does here. So the one on the right is LRGB, the one on the left, we've now introduced hydrogen alpha. Now, the good thing about hydrogen alpha is we can now see all that rich hydrogen field behind M20, and we can really see all that, I guess, nebulosity showing through. But the downside is it tends to overpower that subtle blue reflection nebulosity, which we've lost in this case. But, you know, it's the trade-off. And then, of course, we don't stop there. We go all the way and we go full narrowband on this thing. And now we've introduced the ionized sulfur filter as well. And it's a very different view of the same target. I mean, I could poll the room now and say, okay, who likes the hydrogen one? Who likes the LRGB one? And who likes the narrowband one? And I reckon we'd probably get, you know, even third splits on each one.
Well, there you go, everyone. Comment which one you prefer. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
as you go through, continue on, and we'll get everyone to just tell us which one of those they like the most, and
okay,
I'll let you know how they go.
Each image tells a different story, but again, subjectively, they present differently.
I like the one on the right-hand side myself that was there.
There you go. So here's another technique that's been popular and coming in well lately. So this is classic Statue of Liberty nebula. It's appropriate for our American friends right now that we see this one. So I think it's Stephen Maslin, who's an American astrophotographer, who coined this popular name for this thing, which is interesting because it's in the southern hemisphere and they can't see it. So this is not far away from Carina. It's a great target, and you know, people tell us that, you know, it looks a bit like the Statue of Liberty. Well, it does, but if you take the stars out, now it really does. And now we can really clearly see Liberty standing there. But you know what's really interesting? The Pareidolia thing kicks in here again. A mate of mine, I showed this to him, and he said, oh, yeah, that's the keyboard player from Duran Duran, you know, about to pound down. And I can't unsee that now, you know?
Oh, you've just ruined it for me.
Sorry.
It really does look like he's about to smack those keys.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And here's some trivia for you. When I was much younger and had hair and I was working in England as an assistant, I assisted the photographer who made all his money out of Duran Duran and taught me a great deal about dealing with people and rock stars and all that kind of stuff. There's some stories to tell there, I can tell you.
So just so you know, I think we've got 8 votes so far for the HARGB.
Oh, cool.
About 3 for the LRGB, a couple for the original process, and 1 for the RGB.
Excellent.
So,
excellent.
Good mix there. Good mix.
Oh, that's fun. All right. Let's keep going. Here's a fantastic picture by Peter Ward. Now, Peter is a bit of a legend in Australian astrophotography. He works out of Sydney. He images from light pollutionville and is in the burbs. But this one, he picked up the nebula stars and nebula category this year for the Insight Astronomy Photography of the Year competition. And here again, we've taken this same target, stripped out the stars, but the color palette he's used, and you can read the text there, it's sampled to match press images from Australian bushfires. This image tells a story. And the judges obviously thought, wow, okay, that's a good story to tell. And so there you go. And so we thank Peter for sharing that with us, because it's a great image. This is by Lee Borsboom. Now, Lee's one of those photographers who uses equipment that really punches above its weight. So he's using a Newtonian, and he's better known for shooting galaxies, and he does an amazing job with modest equipment of his galaxies. But he's moved over the dark side. He's shooting a few nebulas now, and this image of M8 is no exception. It's beautiful. It's classic Hubble Space Telescope color palette, and the Hubble Space Telescope color palette is where we assign hydrogen alpha to green, ionized sulfur to red, and ionized oxygen to blue. And so we end up with these kind of golden hues and amazing, beautiful colors. There's a gentleman in America who's a bit of a legend in some ways, in that he's creating new and interesting techniques himself. And his name's Eric Coles. And Eric's producing some extraordinary works recently. Now, this is the same target. It's using the same technique, but he's processed it using something he's come up with called multi-level tone mapping. Now, what, might you ask, is that? So in Lee's image, we saw lots of blue, for example, where the ionized oxygen was kind of very, very dominant in this image. What Eric has done is he's used the histogram selectively to balance the amount of oxygen coming through in various areas. Now, you might argue that, well, that's not real, that's not a scientifically valid image, and you might equally argue that all of this is arbitrary because we're assigning colors to images that, you know, don't exist anyway. But in this case, damn, it makes a pretty picture. So interesting stuff, and I'm just putting this out there that, you know, to create a dynamic image, and this one certainly is no exception, we might have to process things a little differently. Indeed, here's another example that he's done, and a link to a YouTube video that he's created where he actually documents this entire process over about an hour and a half. So feel free to pause and still and capture that link and go and check that out for yourselves if you're interested in what is probably the most funky astro processing technique that's going on right now.
I might get you to send me that link, Andy, and I'll post it to the ASV pages later today.
No worries. So, research. Let's talk about what we're going to image. We've talked about different ways of seeing. We've talked about different ways of framing. But maybe we should talk a little bit about image choices and target selection, because I often go to these beautiful dark sky star parties, indeed, like this one we're supposed to be at right now at NIL. And, you know, when everything's up and running and working perfectly, touch wood, I like to go around the field and, you know, sort of say hi and, you know, what are you imaging tonight? And more often than not, people will tell me, well, I don't know, I haven't decided yet, or I'm not sure, or, you know, I'm imaging M42. You know, it's like there's so many more things to image out there. Let's give everyone some tools as to thinking about how we could maybe find something new to image to create that dynamic image. So the image I'm showing you here is something from Galaxy Map. I'm going to bring it up a little bit bigger so we can talk about that in more detail now. So what we're looking at here is a supercosmos hydrogen alpha survey of the Milky Way. So effectively a Google map of space, if you like. We've got research telescopes around the globe, and they literally point out, take a picture, move a few arc seconds to the left, take a picture, a few degrees left, take another picture, and eventually they'll build up this survey map, if you like. And this is free to everyone. Anyone can access these, and this is not the only one that's out there. But the nice thing is, suddenly we can see all these interesting targets that we all know, but we could also see other things there that we can image. So if we spin over to the far left of this image at about 9 o'clock, you'll see inverted. There's my Sagittarius sunflowers. We talked about that earlier. As we come across to the center, we talked about an image with the lobster and the Cat's Paw Nebula together, and you can see them clearly right in the middle. Further off to the right, it's very bright in this one because it's a very bright nebula, but that's where the fighting dragons of Ara are. But what caught my eye here was this strange filamentary net, if you like, at the bottom half of the picture on the right-hand side at around 10 o'clock. There's this arc, this web, if you like, tendrils, and I thought, what the heck is that? And I researched and Googled, and I couldn't find any images of this thing, and I couldn't even find a name for this thing. So I thought, right, here we go. I'm on a mission if we're going to shoot this thing. So here's the image that I came up with. Now, I didn't realize I was creating quite a rod for my own back when I shot this, because even with my 2x3 degree field of view on my widest telescope, this is a 6-panel mosaic. It took 6 months to shoot this thing. Yeah, you heard that right. 6 months, one image. Crazy, I know. But it's the only image in color that anyone's taken of it to date. And I've Googled this as recently as this morning, and still no one's done another version of it. Maybe they're not crazy enough to want to spend 6 months imaging something. So what are we looking at? This is a supernova remnant. So a very, very old supernova remnant. So that what we're seeing here is the hydrogen alpha remnants, if you like, of a star in the center that's gone supernova and scattered its, stellar material across the universe, and it's still expanding, in fact. So this is in hydrogen alpha and RGB for the stars.
So I think you might have just set a challenge for some of the astro guys who are watching at the moment.
Well, this is the thing, anyone who's got let me see, maybe a TAC Baby Q or a FSQ 106 and a full frame camera, you'd probably you'd get this in 2 panels, I reckon.
There you go. Challenge has been set. I'd like to see some images. I'd like to share some.
Let's put it out there, and don't hold back. Let's do it in full narrowband. Let's not just do it in hydrogen alpha. There you go. Alrighty. How about this one? So this is a slightly different portion of the Milky Way, again using the same survey. And up on your top left there, at about 10 o'clock, you can see the Vela supernova remnant, very popular target, wonderful target. Again, 10 or 11,000 years ago, a star has exploded and gone supernova, scattered and ejected its stellar material across the universe. And these things are going at 500,000, kilometers a second or something. And this superheated material is now interacting with stellar dust, and it's creating these amazing patterns that you can see there, which we can photograph using, narrowband filters. Great. But as we follow this image all the way around to the far right-hand side, we kind of follow a line through the middle of there. And indeed, my background behind this image is in fact this same area. This is what they call the electric guitar cluster. Don't know who names these things, but it's fun. But down the bottom is the area of interest, this thing that looks like a tooth. It's like, okay, once again, what is this? Haven't seen this image before. What's going on? Researched the heck out of it. Couldn't find an image of it. So I thought, right, here we go. Let's have a crack at this. And I think this is 2 or 3 years ago I shot this. So turns out it's called BBW56. And unusually, there's no ionized oxygen here. So I've shot this using the hydrogen alpha, the ionized sulfur, and an unusual filter, ionized nitrogen, which is very close in bandwidth to hydrogen alpha. In fact, if you have a hydrogen alpha filter of 5 nanometers, you've included the narrowband of nitrogen. You have to actually use a 3 nanometer hydrogen alpha filter to separate the nitrogen out. But why would I want to do that? So I can create a tricolor image. David Malan likes blue and yellow pictures. There's a tip, people. So this is in true color, this would be red, red, and redder. But in narrowband, we can play a little bit with our color palette. Now, great minds think alike.
We've got a question here for you from Lee.
Yeah.
What do you use to mosaic? I'm sans focal reducer at the moment, so unable to get wide enough shots without a mosaic. So how do you mosaic?
I mosaicked that one, that was a few years back, the hard way, literally lining it up and then moving it across a little bit and then down a bit and then making sure I had enough overlap. And I used Reggie Star to align all the images, which was an app that you could purchase for doing mosaics. Nowadays, gosh, SGP has a mosaic wizard built into it. Voyager has the same thing built into it. You know, nowadays it's a lot easier to create a mosaic. But as I was saying, great minds think alike, and within the same week of producing this image, I think, in fact, virtually the same day, Mike Sidonio was imaging the same thing. And he imaged this area, BBW 56, in hydrogen alpha. And with this orientation and his field of view, it looks a little bit like the, what does they call that? The jolly big giant, great jolly green giant. Anyway, his nose. It looks.
I can see a very sad. I can see the face of a very sad rooster.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. And indeed, John Gleason, who is an astrophotographer who does amazing panoramas and mosaics, he's virtually mapped, you know, the whole heavens now. If you jump onto the net and look up John Gleason and some of his images, you'll just be amazed. But you can see in the top right section of this image, we can see BBW 56 there, as well as right in the center is the Vela supernova remnant. There's a lot of stuff up there in space, so we don't have to limit ourselves to, you know, being the 45,000th version of M42. Nothing wrong with M42. Here's one that's topical at the moment, because right now in November, we're out of Milky Way season. All of the interesting nebulas are not really accessible to us as we wait for the transition from the south to the north. So all the running chicken and Eta Carina and all that kind of stuff is probably a bit low, and Orion's still coming up at, you know, probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning now, so a bit late. So we can turn our interest to the LMC, the Large Magellanic Cloud, because there's lots of cool stuff to see in it. And indeed, there's some wacky shapes in there. Now, everyone knows the Tarantula Nebula. It's kind of the M42 of the Large Magellanic Cloud. But there's lots and lots of other interesting little nebulas within this region that can be photographed. You know, they're above the Tarantula, you know, directly above it at about 10 o'clock there. There's the Southern Seagull Nebula. In fact, that little train there leading on towards N44, which I showed you earlier, that's kind of the wacky races, if you remember Dick Dastardly and the Perils of Pauline Pitstop. I mean, there's some wacky looking things in there. Up to the far top right, it's just photobombing in the corner, there's something called the Bean Nebula. But in addition to that, there's some other guys there who just don't seem to be getting the astrophotography love that they deserve. So, for example, right in the middle, and just go up a few degrees, there's something there with a fairly bright star. And then also far down to the right, there's a clump of stuff that, you know, again, doesn't seem to get much interest. So let's focus on those right now. So here's the one from the middle. This is NGC 1871. I think there's only a couple of images out there of this in the world, including this one. And I call it the hookah pipe because it reminds me of, you know, those shishas that they smoke in Egypt. And you've got indeed this amazing smoke ring up there at 12 o'clock, which is like, what the heck? You know, how did that form? And again, you know, having, I think it's gamma, can't remember the name of the star now. It'll come back to me later. Right in the middle there, Gamma Velorum. No, it's not Gamma Velorum. No, I won't say it because Perry will pick up on it and tell me, Andy, no, that's wrong.
I'm waiting for him to comment.
Sorry?
I'm waiting for him to comment.
But it's just an extraordinary nebula that, you know, doesn't seem to get a lot of love. And indeed, this is my very latest image. I only shot this one last week. And I call this one the Carnival of the Animals. That's that other little area that I showed you before. I don't think there's another image of this thing out there in isolation of this particular area. Yes, you'll see these guys in wide field shots, but nobody seems to have taken the time to actually focus in on this one quite like this. And, you know, these little guys deserve their love too. Come on, people.
There you go. There's a lot of challenges being set today. I like this. So
yeah, it's all good. And of course the LMC is well known for the super bubbles. So down the bottom we've got a super bubble there for you to see. Super bubbles are Wolf-Rayet stars. So essentially they're a star that's superheated and it's got this stellar wind zooming around it. with ionized oxygen, and the sharpless SH2308 is a well-known example of a Wolf-Rayet star superbubble. So where to from here, folks? Is it time to try something new or different? Do we want to maybe look at, the justifying to the wife why you need to buy a new scope, just so you can have a different field of view? Are we going to continue plonking our image right in the middle, or are we going to think a little bit about, what's around it that might give it context? Do we want to look at one of these new techniques that's out there, or indeed these new processing methods? I can tell you right now, there's a lot of scuttlebutt going on in Astrobin, where I'm a judge there, behind the scenes of the use of Topaz AI noise reduction, which is in fact making images that are from a 5-inch scope look like they're taken by professional instruments. How about the color palette we use? Do we want to stick with this traditional tried and true, or we want to try something new? Or indeed, do we want to stretch ourselves and go and find something new and different to photograph that maybe no one's ever photographed before? Remember, the whole point of this is to have fun, but at the same time to create something that has got impact, something with emotion, and something that tells a story.
Some beautiful images in that session there, Andy.
So once again, guys, if you're interested in getting any help with your astrophotography, I'd be more than happy to assist virtually with one-on-one mentoring. The sessions are $147 Australian or $95 US. And there's a special on this weekend for you lovely people watching today, where you can get 6 sessions for the price of 5 if you want to. And that's where you can find me. And I'd just like to thank you for your attention today. And it's been a pleasure coming along and speaking with you all.
So if anyone's got any questions about what they've just seen, or any questions just in general about what they can image, chuck up a comment now and we'll get Andy to answer. We've got a little bit of spare time. We're actually running on schedule now.
There you go.
So yeah, if anyone's, I think Moral Traveller is saying that the dragon's heart that you showed was amazingly beautiful, and it's a beautiful shot. Oh, here we go. We have a question.
Cool.
What is the minimum recommended time to spend on a target before starting to process?
Depends on where you want to go with that. I think you can start, as I do, maybe on a given night I might get 6 or 7 hours of data. I'll probably process that straight away just to see what I'm getting and how much noise is going to be produced. And you can usually work out that if it's looking pretty noisy, you might have to double or triple the amount of signal you're getting, particularly with narrowband imaging, particularly from the suburbs. Now, if you're out at a dark site, yeah, that's all totally different, because you'll get much better signal to noise ratio out there.
So you can probably get away with your 6 to 7 hours out there as opposed to in the city.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And of course, it also depends on the, I guess, the ratio of your instrument. If you've got a nice fast Newtonian f4 scope like I had from the guys at Sidereal before I moved it on and got the TAC, you'll get your data twice as fast. So my TAC's running at about f7, f6, 5.6 with the reducer. But gee, that f4 Newtonian sure did suck down the photons, and you just can't beat that for a light bucket. Really cool.
Anybody else got any questions for Andy before we finish it up? I think you've wowed everybody with those images, and the challenge has definitely been set. So I think most of the ASV guys in particular know that I like to put up images on the ASV Instagram page and share their images when they post them in their main members forums. So I'm expecting some new, unique targets that I've not seen before now. Yep. I think it's going to be pretty clear tonight, guys.
Got 3 clear nights coming up.
3 clear nights. Nobody needs to sleep. So Getting a lot of thank yous, great presentations. Thank you, Andy. Somebody said that other one that you put up earlier, the one you said looked like a giant, looked like the BFG. A big
That's
friendly
it, the
giant.
BFG. Yeah, you got it.
Here we go. So, Nicholas, yes, the video will be on the ASV's YouTube, on the Astronomical Society of South Australia's YouTube as well. So it'll remain up on ours, definitely. So you can go back and watch it as many times as you want and get as much information as you need to get out of the presentation. It won't be going anywhere. So, Andy, thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure coming along, guys. I hope you got something out of it. I look forward to seeing some dynamic images coming up soon.
That'd be your phone going off there.
No, it's the doorbell. It's that'll be the
time to go.
The aunt with the cake for Junior.
Well, have a good party.
All right, guys. I'll sign off. Thanks so much for having me again. Clear skies, everyone. Take it easy.
Thank you. See you later. And we'll see everybody else shortly for the next stream.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye.